is this what you do? Like, this is
Yeah,
your full-time?
I've been doing this for about 10 years now, so it's been a
That is
while.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. But
I'm
then,
kind of new to like deconstructing Christianity, like the community. So
mm,
like, don't take any offense. Like, I don't know a ton of the like people. I'm just like so new to all of it
it's awesome.
because it was just something I was doing so privately, like
Mm.
for years. So yeah, so I probably would have heard of you had I like searched it out a little sooner than I did.
But you like came like flying onto my radar. I don't know if I found you before you found me. I don't know if even you follow me or not, but like you were like people were sharing you like
Yeah.
crazy out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, cool. And then like I'm just seeing your like every now and again I click on your page and I'm like, whoa, she is like growing. And like I'm like
I know.
I click on like people are like, have you seen her latest post? I click on it and like my wife's liked it and stuff. I'm like, I don't even know my wife follows you. You know, it's like it's
Oh,
just
that's so
crazy. So
funny.
you're
What's her name?
she's like Tillmeister or something. I don't know, but
Okay, I'm gonna have to go look for
she
her because
she is like the least active person on any digital device. I mean, when we were dating, she would like text me like once every 4 days, kind of thing. It was like, you know, like when you're like mad, like
yeah.
puppy dog love, and you're texting all the time. Like she's like, oh, I'll get
Oh
back
yeah,
to him in a few days, and I'm like, dude, what is this?
that is so funny.
I can't get
That
off
is
my phone,
hilarious.
but she is like the opposite. So the fact that
I
she's liking
know.
your posts, dude, that's high tier like
Aw,
approval there, because she doesn't spend much time on her phone.
that's really
So yeah,
cool. That's really
that's
cool
cool.
to hear. Yeah, I know. I've been honestly, and this is, I mean, I'm being so honest. Like, I've been shocked at the response. I still am. Every time I like reach another like sort of, whatever, like going from, well, when I got to 1,000, I was like, this is
This is
madness.
crazy, yeah.
And then 2,000 and then 3,000, like I'm amazed every time and so grateful because like everyone who follows me, I just feel like everyone is so kind, and
Mm.
everyone is, it's like, I just feel really lucky to have all these people like feel drawn to what I'm doing. So
Yeah. I've got to say, so I love your content. I love what you're posting. I think it's fantastic. But there's other accounts out there doing the same thing that I've not seen grow so fast. And it's got to be the most incredible handle I've ever seen. It's so freaking good. Talk Purity to me is perfection. Like, did that just come to you in a moment, or were you sitting on that for
it
a
really
while?
did. I was just thinking, what can I name this? I wanted it to be funny. I just sort of wanted it to be, you know, I didn't want it to be like purity culture recovery or like leaving purity culture. I wanted it to be funny. I just am like, I like to kind of inject some like snarkiness and some humor into things just
Hmm.
because that's my personality. And I just wanted it to be sort of like I could have a nod to what the page is actually about, but also just sort of like a funny pun
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
and I think it's also a little bit subversive because, when you're in purity culture, you're not allowed to make like dirty jokes or like
No,
anything like
yeah.
that.
Very
So
taboo.
I thought it was sort of like, um, sort of fun to just have like a lighthearted feel about something that is so traumatic for people because I don't want people to just come to my page and relive all their trauma every single
Right.
time they
Yeah,
see
yeah.
my content because that to me would be just, it's not a good feeling to me to like ask people to think about such heavy things. Sometimes I just want to laugh at a
Yeah,
meme
you've
or
got to lighten it
something.
up sometimes and have some fun. And yeah,
Right.
yeah, I found that for sure. I think like for most of us, as we weep through this kind of process, like having some laughter in the midst of it is like, and the thing is as well, some of it it's funny, right? Some of the darkest stuff in life. This is why people laugh at funerals and things like that. There's absurdity in suffering. There's
Yeah.
absurdity in like, are you kidding? This is happening. Like what? And some of the stuff, I mean, you shared today. what did you share today that I was dying over? Oh, the contracts people have to sign about what was it? Like it was a marriage wife contract. Oh, it was a
It was,
dating contract.
yeah, it was like, it was to even apply to be on this type of dating site for this very fundamental, it's called, I'm pretty sure it's called New Independent Fundamental Baptist.
That's just
And
multiple tiered layers of like, we're giving you a real clear definition of what you're getting into here.
exactly, so many things there. So yeah, I came across this website, and the questions there were, of course, I mean, you saw it, but it was,
You were looking for a good Baptist like guy, right? I mean, that's this is the honest truth of where you were going. You were like, I'm an
right,
independent
you got
fundamental
me.
Baptist, but I really am looking for a new independent fundamental Baptist partner. I don't want one of those old fundamental independent Baptists.
It's just so weird. Yeah, that website, I mean, the whole thing, like some of those, like I said, I mean, some of the most mundane sort of weird questions, it just blows my mind. I think the further I get away from that, old fundamentalism that I grew up in, the more I just, it's like, does not compute. Like I
Right.
can't, I mean, I obviously used to be in that place, not fully there, but I used to be able to understand the mindset more. But yeah, the more I get away from it, the more I just think it's so wild.
Yeah. There's like a break, isn't there? There's like this mental break where you can no longer see the person you were in that system. And it just is just utterly absurd. And you're like, how can people think like that? Not realizing that on some level, I used to be in that world. I used to be in that bubble to some degree. Maybe I was a bit of an outsider or whatever, but I was there. And I know people that would have been signing that form going, oh, I really want to find someone. So yeah, I'm a woman. This doesn't apply to me. My voice is irrelevant. You know, I'm just
Right.
here as some of the chattel, like someone just sign up and buy me. Like it's just
Yeah.
crazy. Like that world though. And like, I'm sharing that and I'm like, people are gonna not believe this. And I'm like, no, this is so common. Like it's
Yeah.
everywhere. I've been in churches that contracts were signed between like husbands and wives. Contracts were signed when people were like ready to date. They had to like sign things. I talked to a woman just today who was sharing it, and she was like, she was in this Korean kind of church, charismatic church, and they had a rule that any guy who wanted to date in their church had to give them access to his bank records and prove he had the equivalent of about $15,000 in savings. And until you had $15,000 in savings, you couldn't date. Now, I'm not going to lie, I would have died single if that was me.
Yeah.
Who can save 15 grand these days, right? I mean, like, are you kidding?
Most people would
Yeah.
not be able to date in that sort of
Yeah.
system. Yeah. That's a really common thing that I get. People will ask me, is this real? Like,
Yeah.
is the thing, is the thing that I'm posting and sort of poking fun at, is it real? And yes,
Yeah.
I think there may be one post. I have maybe around 150 posts now, and I think there might be one that's a very obvious,
Like a parody or something.
a spoof, but everything else is real, and I found it somewhere on Instagram or the internet somewhere. All of it is real stuff that people are posting, and most of it is fairly current. I don't,
Right, it's not like from the 1970s or whatever.
Most of it is, like
Wow.
in the last year, 2 years.
Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell me a bit about your journey then. So did you were in a fairly fundamental movement, were you? Or what kind of background did you have?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Southern Baptist sort of, and this is Southern US. I'm from the South. So I grew up in that Southern Baptist environment. And that was a big part of my childhood, but that actually wasn't really the source of a lot of the purity culture, that I was eventually indoctrinated into. That kind of came through, I had a very good friend growing up, and her parents, or her family and her parents, had a house church in their home.
Okay.
And so, there's this whole idea of like the non-denominational, but that in itself is its own denomination.
Yeah.
And so it's that sort of environment, and that is really where the whole purity culture sort of thing came into my life. And I was very much a person who just wanted to always do the right thing, like there was right and there was wrong, and I always wanted to try to do the right thing and be good. I was never like rebellious, anything like that. That was so far from me. And so, I had these adults in my life who I like trusted and really I looked up to as kind of like spiritual parents, is how I describe them. But they were telling me like, this is the right thing to do. This is what pleases God. And I was like, okay, well, sure, I'm on board. If that's what is right and that's what is going to make God happy, then,
right.
sign me up.
Who wouldn't?
So, right. I mean, so I really dove headfirst into it. Wow. And I was all in. I was like the type of person who, I didn't want to like be alone with a guy. I didn't want to, kiss before I got married. Like, and I was like staunch on that. I was totally bought into it.
Wow.
I don't know that I could have been more bought into the whole purity culture idea than I was at that point.
Right.
So.
Wow, that's intense. So you were like full blown, like Josh Harris wearing your purity ring, like, like you're in. Wow.
I asked for a purity ring. I wanted it. My parents didn't like give me one. I like wanted one.
Right. That's
so they bought
funny.
one for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, if they're Christian parents, are probably going to be quite stoked. That's just like a, in that world, as your daughter's going, Dad, I want to never have sex at all, or whatever.
Yes.
Here's a ring,
Exactly. And so, that's kind of where it all began.
Wow. And so how long did you kind of stay in that kind of thread, the kind of non-denominational kind of movement kind of?
Probably started around 13 or 14. It's kind of hazy. I don't totally remember exactly how old I was when I started going there, but I met that friend around that time. So it would have been around then. And then did that all through high school, and then went to college and found sort of a similar congregation of
same sort of vibe
in house church. Yeah, same sort of vibe. So then that would have been until I was like 22-ish when I graduated. So like 14 to 22 was like very intense.
Wow. And this whole way through, like you were like, okay, but I'm like saving myself for marriage. This isn't like the way like purity culture is it, like right through college. What kind of college did you go to? You go to like a Christian college?
No, I went to a big state university in the state where I'm from. Yeah, it's 30,000 students, like really huge.
Right. Yeah. Oh, there's the thunder, right? This is
sorry.
No, that's fine. This is good. We can add some dramatic effect. I'll add some like special effects of lightning coming from the sky. God with a thunderbolt hitting you.
It's what I always thought would happen when I, if I stepped outside of the line.
When you first started, right? Yeah, you're like, maybe, oh God, thunder.
Exactly. So, yeah.
That's funny. So, I mean, going to college outside of the Christian bubble, that's often a time where people are starting to go, oh, I'm not sure, like maybe, but you didn't really have those kind of major doubts and waverings you kind of held the course, right?
Yeah, pretty much all through college, I was really intent on those beliefs, and I was around a lot of Christians and involved in that house church. And then in addition to that, Wesley Foundation, I don't know if that is outside of the US. I really don't know.
I've heard of it. I don't really have a place to put it, but it rings a bell. But yeah,
it's like a big college ministry. So I was involved in that too. Cool. Pretty much like if there was a way to be around Christians, I like was all about it. And so
you went right through college in like this like hardcore Christian bubble then. which
Yeah.
is the way to do it, right? I mean, if you're a good, solid, committed Christian, you know, you have some non-Christian friends, but to the end of like hopefully converting them. But other than that, you are like in. So,
Right. And
so where did it all go wrong then?
the eternal question. Yeah. So, probably after college, you know, I didn't have those same friends. I stayed in my college town for a little while.
Okay.
After college and worked and sort of tried to figure out what was next. And then some of my friends, you know, they all moved away, which most people do. Most people don't stay in their college town. They go back home or they go somewhere else. So then, you know, I start sort of not being around the same influences much. And I never had, you know, a lot of people talk about this, you know, earth shattering moment or something like that. That never really happened for me. I never had a moment where I just said, I'm done and I'm, you know, this is over. It was a very slow process. And even into, so from like 22-ish, 22, 23 to maybe even 26. So like 3 to 4 years, I feel like I very slowly started stepping away.
Right.
From all of that. And I mean, for me, that felt slow. Because I would still hold on to certain things. You know, I wasn't going to church, but I would still pray and I would listen to music and I would listen to worship music and I would, you know, think about scriptures and things that meant a lot to me. And then sort of that started not so much being as common. And
sure.
Yeah.
So
that's
what do you think caused that to kind of like that initial I mean, it wasn't something big, sudden. It was just kind of like, were you just, I'm not going to go to church for a few weeks? Or were you asking specific questions that you were starting to go, oh, I'm not even sure about this, maybe, and therefore I'm not going to go to church? Like, can you identify some of the couple of early points where you were like, maybe like that was what kind of kicked off the journey?
Yeah, I think for my particular sort of denomination, that same, you know, house church environment that brought purity culture into my life, there was also this idea, and I don't think every Christian really believes this. I don't really know, but in this environment, we were kind of taught that every physical like malady or anything that's going on with you is a direct result of a sin, a specific sin. And that whatever that very specific sin is, like fear or, you know, I mean, fear, depression, anger, you know, all whatever sin it is. And, you know, if you let that into your life, that will cause like headaches or, you know, all these things. So I was so bought into that. And then when I started sort of questioning it, that to me was a huge thing. When I started realizing, I mean, this doesn't actually make sense.
It's a pretty hard one to stick to, like really hard. It was hard in the Bible times where that was like really a common train of thought within Judaism. They struggled. Like even in the Bible, you're reading people going, it doesn't really make sense. So does it? Like, and so, I mean, it's not hard to imagine that like 2000 years later, it's like, but some people just are epileptic, right? I mean, like, or whatever, you know, it's like, it happens, right?
And like, I was born with allergies and like respiratory problems. You know, what sin did I commit as a
maybe your parents' sin, you know, like
that is actually, they talk about,
they have to, right?
Generational sin too was a big thing in that environment. And that
where God just is a real dick, right? I mean, he's like, your dad watched porn when he was 22 and he forgot about that one time and didn't ask for forgiveness. So I'm sorry, you're born with like, you know, some debilitating illness. It seems
Yeah.
just I'm leveling up all the balances. This seems to work well for me. Like, this is a
Right?
really weird God.
So I started questioning that. And then I really just was like, okay, I don't believe this. I don't believe it. It's too tiring. I got to the point where I had some obsessive tendencies around trying to figure out what I did that caused this thing,
Right.
And I got, I mean, I am a person who already am sort of prone to anxiety, and religion actually just made my anxiety way worse.
Sure.
There's this, I never saw a therapist or a counselor or anything, but there's this phenomenon, I guess you would say, in a lot of religious circles called scrupulosity.
I was literally
And
going to bring it up. That's what I was thinking.
when
From your
I
description and
read
stuff.
about the descriptions of scrupulosity, I see my younger self a lot in those descriptions of what it is and the sort of symptoms of it. So
Yeah.
I think it was actually just really bad for my health.
Yeah.
I had a lot of anxiety about what I was doing wrong that was causing me to be, have a headache one day, or
Yeah.
have a pain in my, like, get an ear infection. I remember I got an ear infection one time in college, and I was like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah. I think though, even if your church isn't like explicitly like that, because I've come across churches which are like, it's a sin for you to take medication. You have to, like, just let God sort it out. Either you deserve to be sick or he'll heal you, or things like, I've those churches that you read about and people are dying and like the parents are going to jail over it and shit. Like I've been to those churches at times. So like, it's crazy, the kind of extreme, but I think even on the subtle end, what you're describing is still picked up on. So even if your church isn't teaching, oh, you got a headache, that's because you lied. You got a back pain, that's because you have unforgiveness. Well, I don't know, that prescriptive. But I think most people growing up in the church have some capacity to subconsciously start connecting the dots where they do associate, I screwed up. I, lied to my parents, so I watched porn or whatever. And they're so young, they haven't even been taught this stuff yet, but they then are going, I'm not going to go outside in that storm. No, just play it, take it easy. I remember as a teenager, like, probably late teenager because I was driving, but like, I remember literally like watching porn one time because I fell and I was like, whatever. And I'm just a teenager. And I remember like thinking, oh, I need to go to my friends, and then being like, I don't feel safe driving because I've watched porn, then I might not be safe in the car. God might remove his protection. It's not he would cause me to crash or like try and kill me, but he would remove his protection, and the devil's gonna be like, I'm gonna get that guy. He's addicted to porn. He's mine, and like all this stuff. And nobody taught me that. No one taught me that. But on some level they did, right? On some level, that's not a rational conclusion to come up and make up on your own. That's come from all kinds of little tidbits within church. And my church upbringing was probably relatively tame on the kind of scale of like really toxic theology, but I still managed to put these kind of dots together. So it's fascinating, isn't it? Like the way that we end up with these kind of connections. And scrupulosity, I mean, like, it's mental because the church is not equipped to deal with that, because the answer is like, stop doing that. All the things that you're doing, stop it. It's like no one's going to give that advice in church. What we recommend is you don't come back and don't apply all these principles we've been teaching you, because that's going to make it worse. Like, there's no real scenario. And the problem is, if you're in it, right, you're full of anxiety, you're obsessively compulsively trying not to sin and trying to root out sin. You're not going to go to a therapist and take their word for it. They're going to be the devil. They're going to be trying to, like, whisper in your ear and lure you away from Jesus. It's just a real disastrous scenario to kind of be caught in that whirlwind. Wow, that's intense. So what was it like as you kind of like started to kind of like sort of fizzle out in these areas, like just go, I'm not so sure, I'm not that bothered about this, I don't believe that anymore. Was that a scary process? Was it exciting? Was it freeing?
There was more anxiety around not being so steadfast about certain things, you know. I was totally a goody two shoes type person, you know. I didn't cuss and I didn't drink and I didn't do any of these things. Like I was like I really was the model, like, young Christian girl. I never like stepped outside of that or did anything bad, you know, like, at least not, I'm not saying I was perfect, but I wasn't doing all of these other, you know, the no-nos or whatever. So
you were never going to get dragged in front of the church with an amazing testimony about how you used to be a drug dealer who was a prostitute, but then you got saved, and like, you know, you always envy those kind of crazy testimonies. Like, I didn't do really anything particularly, right? When you grew up in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I never did anything. I never did anything.
And yet we still managed to feel terrible about ourselves.
Seriously, I know, just the level of shame and everything. So yeah, once I started moving away from it, I think one of the biggest things was starting to have non-Christian friends, or not so fundamental Christian friends, you know, people who were more enjoying their lives. It started to open my eyes a little bit, and just starting to see that you know, not everyone who's outside of the church is terrible or super unhappy or you know, unfulfilled or unloving. You know, that was a big thing, was that only Christians can love others in a real way, in a true genuine sense. And so when I started feeling like that wasn't actually true, that really was a huge kind of shift for me. I think it was big, but it didn't feel big at the time. I was just, you know, but I look back on it, and I can think of a few people who kind of came into my life towards the end of college and after college, and just seeing them as really kind and loving, but also they weren't Christians. So I didn't trust it at first, but then I sort of started having these doubts about, you know, whether everyone outside of Christianity was as bad as I always was told they were going to be, you know?
Right. Yeah. The church kind of shoots itself in the foot there, right? Like, I was talking with, have you come across the Dirty Rotten Church Kids?
Oh yeah.
I just had them on my podcast. I was recording it last night, and we were laughing because
they're amazing.
Oh, they're just so funny. But we were laughing because it's like you're almost taught in church, like, you know, like you're all in church Sunday morning, 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever, and everyone out there is like just in throes of depression or having some sort of wild orgy. Right? It's, you know, either they are like the worst of sinners, or they're desperately trying to sort their lives out, but they have no hope at all. And it's like, you step outside and you're like, oh, people are kind of just normal, and it just completely erodes the trust you have. Like, if we had just presented people outside as being just normal people that maybe didn't have you know, the same spiritual kind of compass that we did, and relationship to God that you could have, or any of these kind of terms, those things would not be as destabilizing, right? When you realize, oh, these people are normal, but because you'd still go, yeah, but they don't know this, or they don't have this, or, you know, there's certain things that you could clearly draw a line and go, yeah, they don't. Maybe it's just, oh yeah, they don't have all the shame and the baggage and the guilt that I have. Maybe that's the most accurate line that we could draw. But, you know, like, it really shoots itself in the foot when it kind of like creates these extreme scenarios to try and scare you away from things, and then they're not true. I mean, sex is a great example of that, right? We create these like extreme scenarios. Oh, if you, you know, like have sex with someone, they'll immediately get pregnant, and like, you know, like it'll ruin your life, and you'll get 23 STDs, and, you know, like whatever, I don't know. Well, that's immediately provable to be wrong, right? I mean, in about 3 seconds. And so you're kind of not really doing yourself a service, right? Sorry. Keep going.
Right. No, I interrupted you, but yeah, I think it is totally easy to disprove that. However, and I know it's not this way in other places in the world, but in the United States, even our government really cripples young people who, you know, grow up to be adults who don't know anything about biology or sex or anything, because we have abstinence only education in a lot of places in the United States, and it is government funded.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we had better information, I feel that a lot of these things that we're taught would be a non-issue, you know, but because of our lack of, it's kind of like a double whammy for Christians in the US, because we don't get good information from school,
and you don't even get it at home.
No, so it's just bad information everywhere we turn. And then kids end up trying to learn about sex by having sex or by watching porn or talking to their friends who don't know anything either.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, that creates its own set of terrible outcomes.
I remember, so earlier in this year, before kind of COVID kicked off, I was in the South and I was in Louisiana and Georgia doing like some different meetings. Georgia, and oh, sweet. Nice. Where from?
Yeah.
Where about?
I'm from a really, really small town. No one's ever heard of it. It's called Sonoy. It's just very small town. Awesome. But it's probably an hour south of Atlanta. So
okay, cool. Yeah. I was in Atlanta, and then I was like much further down towards, I don't even know where it was, near the Florida border. I can't remember. People listening to this are going to kick me in the face on Instagram. They're going to immediately go, why the hell can't you remember the name of the city? I'm sorry so much to anyone listening to this.
Funny. I'm trying to think of what would be where you would have been down there.
Oh, where the heck was it? It's going to kill me. I bet about 10 minutes from now, I'm just going to blurt it out.
Okay.
But
we'll figure it out.
It was fascinating having this conversation. I think it was in Louisiana when I was over there. And I was chatting to some girls there, and we'd been hanging out with different groups of just a bunch of people that follow me that were deconstructing, kind of were like, can you come over and hang out? So we were doing that. I spent most of the time talking to guys, and it was like a really oddly segregated male-female kind of grouping. And I'm from Europe. That's weird to me. Really weird. Yeah. Most of my friends are female. Like I definitely have like 70% friends female, 30% male. Maybe it's slightly less now, but it's imbalanced that way. So I'm like really weirded out when I'm in a room with just guys, and I'm like, what's happening right now? Like, and they're all married and stuff, and I'm like, do you not like invite your wives to things? Or like, and so the last night they brought their wives along, and I was just chatting to them. I was like, what is it like living here? Like it feels segregated. Like, do men understand you? Like we got talking deep, and a couple of them were teachers, and we start talking, and I'm like, what's going on in schools? Like, do you guys talk about stuff like this? What's sex ed like and things like that? And they could not believe that I was talking to them basically at all. They were like, kind of like, oh, like we don't tend to get this kind of attention from like a male speaker or important person. He kind of speaks to the men. But then also like things like I was talking about like, what do you teach in schools about periods? Do the guys get taught about that as well? And they're like, what is happening? No one in our lives has ever talked to us about periods. You know what I mean? And that's just, that would be normal conversation for at least me and my friends. We'd be talking about stuff like that really commonly. That's not an issue. And I was so shocked at just how problematic sex ed is in certain parts of America. And some of them were like, our parents didn't even teach us right. Not because they didn't want to, because they didn't really know. Like, that to me is just astonishing. Like, you know, that like, there's no access to this information in schools, and there's no access. And of course we live in a different world today, and kids are definitely able to educate themselves a lot more. And there's a lot of good things that are trying to educate them actively. But then, we do end up, most kids are educating themselves on like porn or something like that. And it's like, well, that's going to definitely serve people well. Absolutely. That's an accurate portrayal of like day-to-day life and sexuality. But yeah, so what was that like, that component? Did you have were you in like a regular state school?
Yeah, I went to public school. I was homeschooled for most of elementary school, and then middle school, high school, and public school.
But Georgia, like sex ed, not really on the table, right? Wow.
Yeah, it was all abstinence only sort of things. We learned very little about anything biological and zero about any kind of female biology.
Oh, it's so male whitewashed from what I heard as well.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that's
Very
just
much
the bare minimum, right? Women are there as an object, and that's about it. Wow.
Yeah.
How did that? Did you kind of pick up on that? How did that make you kind of like feel as you're growing up in that environment where it is very male centered? It's got the male gaze. You're not learning about your own body, what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, my mom is a bit of a feminist, so she, which is great. I was always a very assertive person, which played into some issues. Like basically, you know, if you're in a really fundamental sort of Christian sect and you are a more assertive woman, usually the older women in the church will tell you that you're going to have to sort of like tone yourself down a little bit, which did happen to me.
Right. Because you're being a Jezebel or a Delilah, or, you know, like.
Yeah, or that you're too strong. You're going to have to learn to submit. Wow. You know, if you have too strong of a personality, or you're too sure of yourself, or too ambitious, you know. So wow. So yeah, it was weird at times, because like I remember I had a friend who, she would say this jokingly. She would say, "You're just my little feminist friend," or something like that. Like she would say it jokingly as if it was like a bad thing. But I was always a little bit on the edge of like not 100% the like submissive, quiet woman I was supposed to be.
Sure.
So it was weird for me to, you know, certain aspects of it, the purity culture, some of it was weird, but then also I just wanted to be good, so I just sort of like bought into it. And you don't know what you don't know about sex and your body and stuff like that. So I didn't know anything, so there was nothing for me to question, because I had nothing else to go on in terms of the way that sex ed was taught when I was 13 years old. So
yeah, it's so problematic. And from my understanding, generally speaking, I mean, I know that Obama tried to roll back the abstinence programs and stuff, didn't he? From what I understand, they were big in kind of like Bush, even up to Clinton. But I think Obama tried to roll them back, and then they kind of kick-started again or something in 2016. But it feels like the data is there that this is not good, that people still have sex at the same age. They're still as likely to be exposed to, all kinds of different things. They're more likely, I think, to catch STDs. They're more likely to get pregnant. There's not any strong evidence that this helps the situation. But it feels like that doesn't seem to matter. Like what's the deal there? Is that just religion in politics? Is that largely being pushed by religion, or is that more just religiosity, like a culture? Like, is that quite a cultural thing even apart from the religion, if you can even separate those two in the South?
Yeah, I think it is a very cultural thing, in a lot of ways, because we've kind of let the lines of separation of church and state kind of become blurred, and there's a lot of family values pacts, like political action committees, and lobbying groups here that really push an anti-gay agenda and a family values agenda, which would obviously take sex education off the table. But like one of my first posts that I ever made on my page was comparing a map of the US and the states that identify as most religious, which are kind of, if you look at the US, they're kind of on the bottom half of the country.
Yep.
Most of them. And then a map with states that have the highest teen pregnancy rates.
Yeah. It's a classic, right?
Almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
So you can see that, not only do we have zero data that shows that abstinence-only education is helpful, we actually do have data that shows that it's harmful.
Yeah.
So, and that it doesn't work. And that comprehensive sex education, I saw a statistic that on average, teens who receive comprehensive sex ed delay their first time having sex by, on average, 2 years.
Yeah, I've heard that as well, yeah.
Because they don't feel pressure, they know about it, and they have the facts, and they have good information, and they don't feel the need to go, experience it to know anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen data, because I read that, I don't know when I read that, it was quite a while back, like I remember reading that, but I read alongside it as well, that there was data on families, so parents that talk openly with their children about sex from a young age right through teenage years, also delays the onset of their children having sex by about the same period, about 2 to 3 years. And so it has a massive effect. But like there's this, so I mean, you would assume the church's goal here is to delay having sex until you're ready. Married would be the word for ready in that context. But you would assume that goal is there. And yet there seems to be this, they're caught in a rock and a hard place scenario, because they don't want to use this mechanism to get there. They don't want to talk about sex. They don't. What do you reckon's what's going on there that you're seeing, like the church going, well, we could actually stop people having sex early. We could stop teenage pregnancy or whatever, but we'd have to start educating people at a young age about sex, their bodies, how it works, what's going on. What are the stumbling blocks in there that Christians are going to have to navigate if they're going to move forward in that area?
I think a big thing about it is that the church would have to apologize to people who were hurt by the way they've done things for decades. They would also have to admit that they were wrong and shift,
You think they're like too deep to that point? We've all been in that point where you go a little too far and like, shit, I've gone too far in now. I can't, if I apologize, I'm gonna look like a total ass.
That's how I feel, because, and just extrapolating this, I might be making too many generalizations, but at least in the American church, who's in charge? White men, white older men, and how good are they generally at just, as again, this is a generalization, so nobody get mad at me or whatever, but when you set a certain demographic of people up as kind of God's mouthpiece on earth, why would they admit that they were wrong? They're not wrong. It's everyone else is not holy enough to do what God says. So I think it would be a huge blow to pride for these people in charge, mostly again men, white men, to say that they had done anything wrong.
Do you think, so this is something I'm intrigued by, because there is a slow and very slow, to be fair, in certain movements a bit quicker, gradual kind of like shift towards having more of a female voice in leadership and equipping, even it's such a patriarchal kind of concept, but allowing blah, 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 all these kind of, and this is just the nature of it, right? If one group is in charge, they have to allow another group to be a part of that as well. On some level, they're the people that get to choose. But that's happening. However we word that, I'm stumbling around. Oh God, there's no good way to talk about this. But that's happening. Do you think women in the church want to see change there themselves. And I'm not saying that there aren't women that want to see it, but I think if you took a generalized, again, if you broad stroked, like this is what average woman in the evangelical church, do you think they would be a voice of change going, hey, we've made some mistakes, we need to apply some sex education, less abstinence?
Yeah. I think that probably not in the same way that I would personally hope, because there are the, patriarchal systems require everyone to internalize those ideas, so that it's not just the men in charge who are passing on the ideas. It requires that everyone buy into them. So I do think you're right that, there are very outspoken female, they wouldn't call themselves leaders, they would, but they're female Christian, whatever, bloggers. I don't know what they call themselves.
Voices
they can't
or
be, they can't be a
influencer.
leader.
I don't
Yeah,
know,
they
but
can't be a leader or pastor or whatever. But there are women.
Don't touch those male words, right?
Right. There are a lot of Christian women out there who are perpetuating these ideas, possibly even more than some men. So no, you're totally right. I mean, a lot of the content from my page is from women. Sure. Women created it, and it's
really tough. I just had do you know Hallie Kim? She's great. She's on Instagram. You should be following her if not.
We follow each other.
Okay. I just had her on a week or so ago, and we talked about that, the internalization, because when I used to travel and speak in churches like all the time, all over the world, one of the things for a while, I did like a little tour, and I was trying to basically go into these churches and kind of like just moving baby steps towards kind of, allowing women to have more of a voice, more of a platform, telling women, hey, you are an amazing, powerful individual. You are not just this packaged thing that comes with a man, and God forbid you don't come with a man and you're useless. That's not how this works. And I was talking to her, and I was like talking about how, in my experience, at the end of those meetings, I'd have a line of women wanting to talk to me, very few men. And unfortunately, it wasn't to say thank you. Some did, but most were the most ardent, like, and it was this, and she was talking about this internalization of the patriarchy. And so my point in asking that is, and I don't know, maybe it would make a big shift, but I've got an inkling that I think the problem is so institutionalized that I guess my question is, how does this change? Does the whole system need to come burning down? Because is that going to happen? Or, it's not as simple as going, oh, maybe if we let some women in charge, or maybe, if we just got that group of people out, or it feels like it's a deep rooted issue running right through, if not all Christianity, certainly a good kind of chunk of it. What needs to happen for that to change? Or do people just need to leave, to come out, to deconstruct, to move on? Or do you have thoughts?
This is probably going to sound terrible. I really have no indication or hope that current systems in place, current denominations would be willing to change. I really don't. And maybe that sounds bleak, but I really don't think it would happen until younger people who kind of step away a little bit and sort of look at the problems from the outside. If those people come away and then decide they maybe want to change it and go back and sort of change things from the inside out, maybe I can see that happening. But for the way things are now, I mean, I don't see how things could change internally. I don't see anyone, like you said, I don't see the women of the church rising up, or men wanting to kind of release some of their privilege and sort of defer to women on anything. I don't really see it happening either way.
Yeah.
But I haven't been to church in years, so maybe there's things happening that are good. I haven't seen any evidence of it, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think your hypothesis is probably fairly it's a reasonable and level-headed one based on the evidence at hand, at least in certain parts of the world, in certain denominations, whatever that might look like. I agree.
Yeah.
There's maybe, I mean, there's all kinds of, there's progressive movements in Christianity and things
Sure.
like the liberal church and all these different titles that different kind of Christianities are given, mainline Christianity, Unitarian.
Mm-hmm.
There's different movements that I'm like, yeah, I can see that doing well and moving in a different direction. But definitely it feels like there's and I think it's a tough one, because this is like, for whatever reason, it's fascinating, but it's at the core, where the church hasn't made greed or lying or corruption or, these aren't the things, it hasn't made power, empire, violence. That's not the thing. The thing is sex.
Yeah.
That's
right.
the thing, right? I mean, like, it's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that defines you, right? You can be a murderer and it doesn't change who you are if you're able to say a prayer, but you have sex before marriage and that changes who you are, at least if you're a female.
Right.
Not so much for the men, but
Right.
And so it just feels like it's such a fundamental component of at least kind of
Mm-hmm.
more conservative fundamental branches of Christianity, evangelical Christianity. It feels very hopeless, I think. Yeah.
I say a lot of the time, like, for me, looking back on my experience in evangelical Christianity, I say this, and I'm not kidding. I really think it's a sex cult in a lot of ways. Just the way that sex is built up as an idol in this particular group of, this particular part of Christianity, evangelical Christianity, especially in the US. I mean, I can't speak for other places, but I'm not kidding. I know it sounds funny to call it a sex cult, but I'm very serious about it, just because I was in it and I know how I felt about sex in it, and like the way that sex is controlled and information about sex is controlled and behavior. You look at all these different parts of cults and the way that they control anything or do or feel about it. It's, to me, very cult-like.
Yeah, it is weird, because it feels again, I didn't grow up in, I spent 4 years in America, but I was older at that point, in my kind of like early 20s, mid 20s, but I was still single through that as well, so it was still a very heightened kind of focus and central kind of theme.
Right.
But growing up as a teenager, everything revolved around I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I'm pretty confident that every concept and relationship and connection I had to God, it all kind of centered around, like, basically masturbation and sex. As a teenage boy, that's all that it's all that ever, like, kind of really ever came up in youth group and stuff. That's what we talked about. It was all ever like your accountability partner would ask you about, oh, did you watch porn this week? Did you masturbate? Or did you have some bad thoughts about some pretty girl or whatever? Like, your youth pastor was always asking about it. Like, your leaders were always asking about it. And like, literally, I was sharing the other night, like, I would like take communion, and communion would come around and I'd be like, oh, but I did watch porn this week, so maybe I shouldn't take communion. But if I don't take communion, everyone's going to know. And it's probably, he's a teenager. He's because he masturbated. Oh, so then you're like, I'll take the bread and hope that God doesn't hit me with a lightning bolt, or, but, and I'm like, every thought when, like, I'm like, shall I go out to see my friends? Oh, well, I did some sort of sexual sin and maybe I'm not safe to drive. Like, it was everything. Even going to God to pray, it was like, well, when did I last screw up? And you think about, I was a teenage boy growing up in the church. God, I was masturbating like endlessly. Like, that's all you do as a teenage boy when you've got spare time. Like, and so, like, but that it just was one and the same. And then the weird part is, when you get married, then no one ever talks about sex again. it just is silence. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's this really weird dynamic. So you talked about this being like a sex cult looking back growing up. Like, what I'm saying of my experience is that similar, because I know that for females it's a totally different dynamic where your very identity and worth is so wrapped up in this because you're the
Mm-hmm.
object of desire. You don't, no one really cares about your desire, right? That does not get massively talked about. It's a, you're the
Yeah.
stumbling block, you're the, whatever it might
Mm-hmm.
be. You're the object of purity to be protected, so you don't let that rose petal fall off, or the lollipop get licked, or the sticky tape get stuck. Like all these kind of
Yeah.
things. How was that for you growing up? Like, what did that look like, and what did that do to you, like psychologically? Looking back, maybe in the middle, you may not have known what was happening and going on, but I'm sure you're looking back, you've got some thoughts.
Yeah, I think it just made me super cautious and really scared um to even um like, for example, you talked about how you have a lot of female friends. I have a twin brother, so I always got along really well with guys. But then after coming into this environment where purity culture was sort of introduced to me, I was kind of told, it's
Mm,
not good to really be spending a lot of time with guys because you could develop what they kind of referred to as emotional intimacy, which meant like
right.
just having a connection with another human being like we all
Don't you
do,
dare
but
do that. God.
right. So that was you know that was a
Wow.
weird thing for me because I don't know, it just felt I do think that I missed out on a lot of really good friendships
Mm,
potentially. And it also made me look at every single guy as like, oh, is this the guy that like God wants for me? If it's
mm,
not a guy who like God is saying that this is the one, then I can't, I can't engage. Like I just, um, so it set up some really weird relational things
right.
that I think are still sort of, somewhere in the back of my mind sometimes.
Mm.
I don't know if that fully answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Um,
it sounds huge though. I mean, like, where you even draw those lines when you're trying to figure out, like, because you need to get to know guys to figure out, well, is this potentially the one or whatever? Because then I am allowed to kind of start kind of talking to them and get to know them and go in some sort of like,
yeah.
Josh Harris courting kind of process or whatever. Like he can
Mm-hmm.
contact my dad and let him know that he's going to marry me in 3 years and we should start dating. Or, but
Exactly.
where do you
Yeah.
draw that line? Because it feels like you can't really get to know the person, but you somehow have to make these kind of epic decisions about them, like based on very little information, because you're not allowed to like it. It's and not only that, you're kind of set up for like a huge dysfunctional disadvantage where you can't relate
Mm-hmm.
to 50% of the world on some level, right? And certainly you're not
Exactly.
like trained just by osmosis of just doing it, right? You don't get to do it.
Right.
That's crazy. That is
Mm-hmm.
tough, really tough. Because
Yeah.
I did not have that experience really in the UK. I came across one person in the UK who was going through like a discipleship program that I had been
Mm-hmm.
friends with before, and she went to this like, yeah, I don't know, mentorship discipleship program. She did it as like a gap year between university and high school. So she was like, I guess 17, 18, finished high school, did this program, and the church suddenly was like, you're not allowed to talk to guys after 8 p.m. at night. You're not allowed to ever be alone with a guy. You're not allowed to. And I was like, dude, I've known you for like 2 years. I don't think if we like hang out at a coffee shop at 8 p.m., you're suddenly going to get pregnant. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, this feels
Right.
like we're good. We're friends here. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay.
Right.
But no, like, I mean, and she was like, I'll get kicked off this program. But that's about it. Like most kind of guys and girls kind of did have some level of being able to engage, at least from my experience of being in the UK. I'd
Mm-hmm.
imagine most of Europe is quite similar. It feels like America
Mm-hmm.
is like a whole nother level in its kind of intellectual jumps that it makes about these concepts. So it's not just that we have to make sure men and girls and guys don't mix in case they get pregnant. It's like, well, now they can't even talk. Now they can't even, be in a room together alone, even on separate sides of the room. God knows what will happen. Like,
yeah,
it's like an extreme. Everything is to such an extreme. It just seems crazy, really, really crazy.
I mean, this is from the same country. I mean, we had prohibition. I don't know if other countries had prohibition. I mean, we are a country of extremes.
Yeah.
In nearly everything. So, yeah, we're just really good at taking things to the nth degree. Like, I think about really cool things from around the world, and then when they come to America, they just get like blown out the roof, and like everything is crazier, everything is bigger, whatever it is. It's like that's what America does,
right?
Right,
which is fantastic some of the times, and then other times it's awesome. Terrifying. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Right. Yeah, man, that's intense. Talk to me. So again, I'm a guy. I have my experience, but it's very different, obviously. And talking to female friends, my wife, different people I know. I know that for females, this purity culture has a totally different level of shame that kind of like becomes attached to sexuality, to relationships with the other sex, to even your own value, your own worth, things like that. Was that something that you wrestled with in this process as well?
Of like the deconstruction process, or when I was really just in it?
Within the process, and then I guess coming out of it would be interesting to know as well, like how you then navigated if it was something that you were struggling with.
Yeah, I think it, anything that you kind of build this, I sort of describe it as like a mystique. Like sex was sort of like this thing that was there, and we were told it was really holy, but also it was like too holy to talk about in a lot of ways. We could only talk about it by what the Bible said about it. We couldn't know anything real about it. So, but that it was something that, your husband one day was going to be so glad if you just didn't have sex until you got married. And I mean, when I say it out loud, I'm like, why would I have cared at 13 years old? I wasn't even in the frame of mind to think about being married. I mean, what 13-year-old understands?
Right. Well, in this day and world, right?
Well, exactly.
It should be a foreign concept to most 13-year-old girls. Yeah.
It should be. I realize there are places in the world, unfortunately, where that I'm sure goes on. But, in my 13-year-old mind, I didn't know when I said that I wouldn't have sex until I got married, or wouldn't kiss until I got married. I didn't know what I was saying. I had no idea. I just was told, God is going to be really pleased with you, and the man you're going to marry will be really pleased with you if you make this commitment and you stick to it. So just even the thought of if there would be a guy that I liked who was, whatever, and I thought about that person in a sense of like, oh, I would love to, like, for this to be the guy that God chose for me. You would feel like guilty sometimes, like having these like romantic ideas, or like having a crush. I mean, we're not talking about anything crazy. It's just normal things. You're taught that like the normal parts of growing up are not, they shouldn't be part of your life, because you're supposed to be set apart from the rest of the world. So there is a lot of shame when you're being told one thing, that you're supposed to behave in a certain way, but then literally just hormones and life and everything else is pointing you in a totally different direction.
Yeah.
and you think that there's something wrong with you, and that
Yeah.
probably every other girl has this figured out, and that it's just a problem with you.
Right. Because you're not talking about it, you don't really get to understand that everyone else is going through. There seems to be as well, like, I wonder if like this is something you've come across as well, but there seems to be this dynamic between, you know, if realistically and practically, if you want someone to pick you out of, you know, all the girls in the youth group and go, that's the one I want to marry, you know, like that's the one I'm going to marry in a year and a half when we graduate or whatever, you know, like there's an element of like, you need to go, hi, I'm this one here. You know, you need to stand out in some way. You need to be funny. You need to be cute. You need to be smart. You need to look a certain way or whatever that person is going to find attractive. And yet at the same time, all those things are kind of demonized as well. Like this kind of idea of putting yourself out there, or because it's got to be the guy, right? The guy has to pursue. And yet,
Right.
I mean, let's face reality as well. In the church, there's 2 females for every 1 male, single. So first of all, you're screwed anyway, right? Because half of you aren't going to be able to marry someone because, right, unless the guy's going to go into polygamy, it's not going to happen. And same sex isn't going to be on the table, right? That's not going to happen anytime soon. So you gotta on some level go, I gotta outshine half the girls here if I want, you know, if these 20 girls, if I want to get married to one of these 10 guys, I need to kind of somehow be noticed. And yet, like, certainly growing up in the environments I grew up in, there was this kind of not even unspoken, it was kind of spoken of like, girls, you stay modest, you cover up, you don't flirt, you you know, if you just pursue God, the right man will notice you and come along, all that kind of stuff. Was that in your head? Were you aware of those dynamics of like, I want a guy to notice me, but then is that okay? And did you go through that kind of stuff? Because looking back, I can see that in my youth group and go, gosh, that was not a good situation to be a girl in. But when I was in the midst of it, I didn't really think about any of that stuff. Or I was probably like, yeah, no, it's good. Girls should be modest, and, you know, God will highlight the right girl for me. Or, you know, I don't know.
No, it is a really weird sort of dynamic because, I mean, we're teenage girls. We want to feel, you know, we want to feel attractive to guys, but at the same time, we're supposed to be modest and not, you know, put ourselves out there too much in a way that's not honoring to God. And modesty was a huge thing. You know, and that was probably modesty, like dress and everything like that. That was probably the thing that I held on to the longest, not on purpose, but just internally. Even now, I still sometimes am like, do I wear this because I like it, or do I wear this because this feels uncomfortable to wear something else? Even like clothes that I like more, I feel a little uncomfortable still. So there is a lot of pressure to you know, because you're always told that you want a really godly man, and what is a really godly man looking for? They're looking for a super godly woman who, you know, her countenance shines and she's like, you know, got all these like beautiful spiritual gifts and stuff like that. So it's a really weird, it is definitely a weird dynamic for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like fraught with issues. And you're not the first person by any means I've heard kind of say that sort of thing about the modesty culture and things like that, where it's a big deal. Like, and way more in America, again, to some degree. I mean, it's a big deal here in the UK for sure, but like in America, I mean, I was in California when I moved to America for 4 years, and we spent our whole time, like, anytime there was like some breaks, we were like, okay, it's too hot, let's get into a pool. And yet all the girls had to like wear like shorts and t-shirts, and I was like, you're not hot? Like, what's happening right now? I'm like, this is weird. It's like, I wouldn't have thought twice. I mean, I was from Scotland, so I didn't see many girls in bikinis anyway, to be fair. But I'd like live with girls by this point. I'd seen them like running along the hallway in a towel or in a bikini, in a bra and underwear or something. Like that wasn't a big deal. And so I'm like, but you can't have a woman like on any level like be wearing like a one piece or a bikini in case like I don't know, again, like what's gonna happen here? Like do people just have no trust in human beings not like ravaging one another and like raping nonstop everywhere? And if like a woman wears a strapped top or like what do people think is happening here? It's such a, and there's no onus on the guys. Was that something you kind of picked up on at that age? Did you kind of go, why the hell is everyone going, I'm the problem for dressing a certain way? Like, why is no one saying, hey guys, just stop looking at girls that way? That's not okay. Like, did you guys pick up on that? Your girlfriends, like, did you notice that sort of dynamic?
Well, I definitely noticed. I mean, I definitely bought into all the modesty stuff. But I didn't ever question it. I didn't ever question it. I just totally thought, well, this is the way that God wants it to be, so this is how it is, you know. I never stopped to think, oh, what if guys just had self-control, you know, or what if guys already do have self-control and this is not
right. And we're just making an imaginary issue to just spend 90% of our time talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's really bad for both sides. I think that's what you know, it does appear, at least in every sort of way that I can figure, that purity culture does disproportionately affect women, at least in certain ways. But it's also hard to know if that's what's happening, if it does affect women way more, or if men who are affected by it just don't want to talk about it. Because, like, for example, like I get the stats on my followers, and
right.
like 87% of the people who follow me are women.
Wow, that's crazy.
I mean, 87% is, I mean, just
it's
a vast majority, clearly.
Right. Yeah.
So,
wow.
But you know, there are certain parts of it that very clearly, you know, women are taught that they are, just by virtue of having a body with certain features, that's shameful. And then also men are sort of set up to think that they don't have any way to control themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And so no one's winning. No one's winning.
It's not a good system. Like, I mean,
yeah,
it's brutal. It is utterly brutal. And so what caused you to kind of start your, I mean, are you primarily just Instagram that you're doing? Like, that's how I follow you, but is that kind of your mechanism of doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, that's the main place I'm doing any kind of content.
Right.
I also recently started using TikTok a little bit.
Nice.
Because Christian TikTok and purity culture TikTok is alive and well.
Yeah,
so,
seriously.
You know, so I go over there sometimes and I'll find little videos, or I'll react to them, or I'll make my own things.
Nice.
Make my own content over there. So yeah, mainly Instagram, a little bit of TikTok. Still figuring that out, because people over there are horrible to each other.
Really? Wow.
The community is way
not as healthy as Instagram.
No, not even close. I have had to take videos down because people were being so horrible to each other in the comments, and I just didn't feel like I could monitor it.
Right. And you just don't want to be a platform for that at all. Oh, exactly.
I was just like, y'all are crazy. Y'all are terrible to each other. I can't even do this anymore. I don't have time or energy to put into babysitting y'all. So I'm just taking this video away so nobody can say anything on it anymore. So yeah, but the way it kind of all started with my Instagram, I actually put a little question box on my personal page. You know, it's a private account, but I put a little question box on my stories over there, and just asking, you know, I have less than 1,000 people who follow me over there, just asking kind of how purity culture has affected my friends who follow me.
Sure.
And the responses were unbelievable, just
Wow.
unreal. So many responses. I saved it as a story highlight on my account, and I look back at it from time to time. But I just really was blown away by it, and I just thought to myself, this is obviously a really huge problem. And it's also a huge problem that I don't really see people talking about very much. I could tell that this little question I put out there was probably the first time that some of these people who were responding had ever felt like they had an outlet to talk about it. And I just thought, that seemed like such an injustice to me. And I'm a very much like an advocate personality. So I just was thinking, what do we do? Do I try to find some sort of format for like a support group for each other, or like what can I do about this? Because it just was really, sticking with me how many people send me messages or replied to that little question. And so then, the page sort of just seemed like a very natural and, low barrier to entry sort of way to start this up. So.
Wow. So, that's awesome. I love your heart in that, because it comes across as well. It feels like I've followed your stories and different interactions on the community and stuff, and it does feel like there's always the people that will come on to pick a fight. Like, they're everywhere, and you can kind of spot them a mile off.
Sure.
Instagram does feel like it is a bit more of a kind of safe community for whatever reasons. That's why I spend all my time on Instagram and just forsake all other platforms, basically.
Exactly.
It feels like you've created something there, like, that really does kind of facilitate that. What's your goal? Like, what are you trying to do? Are you being quite intentional in moving in a certain way? Are you trying to reach certain people, or is it just kind of a let's see what happens?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say, because in the very beginning of starting my page, I was shocked when I got to like 250 followers, kind of like I said in the beginning.
Right.
I really just I had no real way of knowing how many people would want to engage with the content that I was making. So I think it has evolved a little bit. I started it, I think it was last October, around Halloween last year is when pretty sure it's when I started it. But I kind of, I could see it kind of going towards more, someone recently said you should start a Patreon. And then even someone today said, when are you doing a podcast for yourself? Because I've been doing more podcasts recently.
Right.
And so I have these ideas of things that I would love to do. But the main thing right now is just keeping that community feel, which, to be honest, is getting harder. I'm not saying I'm like some huge influencer. But the more people follow me, obviously I don't feel like I can get to every single DM all the time. Or
absolutely. You've got a job. That's like a full-time job exactly. At a certain point. Yeah.
Exactly. But I do always want to make sure that like the community feeling is still there, because even if I can't get to somebody, I see people in the comments like taking care of each other and sort of like talking to each other, which I think is the best case scenario. Yeah, it's like exactly what I want, and I never want to lose that. I would rather stay small than get to the point where it just feels like I'm just making content for the sake of it. That's really not something I want to do. So I thought like maybe a Patreon or something where we can have even more people who are really wanting to interact with each other on an
Sure.
even more sort of like one-to-one or like group interactions or something like that. That I would love to do something like that if I can figure out what I can offer to people that is worth
Right.
some kind of $5 a month.
I'm sure
whatever it is.
I'm sure you could offer. I do. So the way I do things for myself, and this is my full-time job. Now, granted, I have no money, but I do absolutely
Right.
everything for free. I'll talk to people for hours on end. I spend about 5 to 6 hours a day talking to people. I put out podcasts for free. I make videos for free. I write resources for free. I wrote one book. I give it for free. Like everything is free, and people still go, "I'm going to give this guy $5 a month." And so I think you'll be really surprised if you are helping people the way that I see that you're helping people, and the way that you're starting to see, gosh, yeah, people need this and are really getting life from it, and being, acknowledged and seen in their journey and their pain. Like, people want to support that kind of thing, whether they get a blog every week, or whatever, a newsletter. Like, that's, I think, a lot of the time quite immaterial to people. And so I think what you're doing is great. And I think you could do a Patreon quite easily, I reckon. So there you go. And then you could make this your purpose and your dream, and you live your work and all the stuff we were talking about in the beginning, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm really glad you came on. Like, I think like this is such a huge topic, and like, you could easily do podcasts and have different people on, just even telling their stories, or get some experts on in different areas, like different. I mean, like, I would love to have you. And have you come across Dr. Tina Shermer-Sellas?
Yes.
She is awesome.
She is awesome. I think she commented on one of my things last week. I kind of was so surprised that she commented on my thing. I was like a little bit, I was so excited. I was just like, wow, she noticed my account. Like,
that's awesome.
I think she's so wonderful. And
yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, she's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, but like, people like that as well. So I mean, because just the mix, people want to hear stories of people that are like them. They want to listen to an expert talk about, sex and the dynamics it has on our psyche and how we grow. And you could have experts on. I mean, like, that would be a good podcast.
Yeah.
I'd love that podcast.
Yeah, I would love to do something like that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's good. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, it's been a real privilege. I'm really enjoying what you're doing, what you're developing, what you're growing. I'm constantly sharing your stuff and trying to send people your way. So hopefully that if that feeds the fire in you doing something more, podcast, things like that, I'm going to be very chuffed. But yeah.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for the support. Yeah, I just I don't know why. I just, like I said earlier, I'm just always constantly surprised. Like, it still hasn't really totally sank in. Like, people really connect with what I'm doing, and I'm just still constantly happy and surprised and feeling super grateful that people find me and want to follow along. So
yeah, do you ever wonder if part of that is growing up within the evangelical concept of women aren't leaders, aren't speakers, aren't influential, don't have as much to say as a male, or things like that? Is any of that, do you reckon, a holdover? Or I don't know.
I mean, maybe so. Yeah, it's like you don't you kind of, I haven't really fully like thought that through, honestly, but yeah, I'm just always really surprised when people think that I share some like really something really poignant, or like some bit of wisdom, like, but I think I mean, this is maybe just in, like you said, coming from the evangelical faith or whatever, women are always taught to kind of downplay whatever it is about them that would make them stand out, and again, I'm not like an expert or anything, but I have gone through a lot. I have a lot of experiences that other people relate to, and I do have things to say, and obviously there are people who really are, engaging in what I have to say. So
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's easy. We all like beat ourselves up and go, why is anyone listening to me? Or, we all do that to some degree, but like, I'm like, dude, you are blowing up and people are loving it. And I tell you, I am like, this is good stuff. When you share stuff, I'm like, that is good. Like, you'll see, like, I share stuff fairly often on my stories and stuff, but I don't share that much. I share a couple of things a day or something. Your stuff is coming out more often than not, and so that speaks volumes of like what you're saying is there is poignant. It is very succinct. It's really good. It's funny as well. And I think that's it. If you can be funny and bring up a good point and talk and bring a talking point around a good meme or a funny, like, you find like a crazy like dating forum or whatever, like there's gonna be some good discussion on that. It's gonna happen. So no, you're doing a great job. Really I'm excited to see where it goes, because I think we need more content like this, more people out there. There's not enough, and like there could be millions of people talking about this, and we'd still need more people to talk about it. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge deal. Like we said, it's like one of the cornerstones of church, and so it's going to have to be a cornerstone in people's deconstruction, I think. I really do. But
and I see more. I always get really excited when someone says, I saw this on your page and it helped me in a conversation I was having with my friends from back home, or my friends I went to Christian school with, or whatever it is. That is exciting to me, because I think that is really important. It empowers people to feel like, no, I actually have a differing belief about this. I've actually evolved in the way I think about sex and relationships, and like, so just giving people those ways of talking about it, I think is really cool, and just allows, people to build their own confidence in how they are deciding to live out this area of their life. I think that's
it feels really problematic in that the conversations that need to happen with certain types of people are so different than the conversations you can have with certain types of people. And so like you look at someone that's quite fundamental and you can say, well, actually, I've redefined what a healthy sexual ethic looks like. And, you can look at all different things, and you can maybe go, well, actually, like, if you look at culturally anyway, like what the hell's the Bible saying about what we call marriage today anyway? No one went on a date until about 200 years ago. That was like the first date anyway. Like, so like up until then, people were like selling women. Like, are you calling for people to sell women? Like, that kind of conversation would be a healthy conversation that might move people towards kind of redefining their concepts of what even is marriage, and then what's sex before that. And, all these things. Obviously, the Bible's not talking about that ever, because that didn't exist then. That conversation can't happen with a fundamental, right? They're going to go, well, point me to the Bible verse that says it's okay to have sex like a harlot, or, like a fornicator or whatever. Like, how do you think people can go about having a conversation with that person? Is there a healthy conversation? I mean, because it's one thing to go, well, you just ignore them, but it's different if it's like your friend to like your mom or your partner, or I don't know. Is it possible to have that conversation?
I think one of the biggest things that's important is, you may not be able to just say, well, this is what I was taught and this is just wrong, or this, whatever. It's, for me, if you're in a place of safety with this, whoever it is, I think it's important to talk about how it affected you personally on a personal level, because, your parents or whoever might not respect your belief, because there's all kinds of other issues with parents respecting their children's beliefs and things like that. So you may not be able to get your parents to respect your beliefs, but hopefully they would listen to you in the way that maybe something they thought was good, like purity culture, maybe they would listen to how it actually has manifest in your own life. and how it has hurt you, and how, you know, you're trying to recover from this pain, this trauma, whatever it is. I think it's, you know, challenging someone's belief or someone's dogma about something, you know, it's usually not successful. Yeah, it's not usually not successful. And then they will walk away feeling good that they stood in their beliefs and they were a strong Christian, and you'll walk away feeling really hurt that, you know, they wouldn't listen to you. But if you can bring it back to a personal experience and say, you know, mom and dad or whoever, this is the way that this experience in the church, or this experience, you know, these things that you taught me, this is how it has affected my life. And this is how it made me feel about myself. And this is how it's affected my ability to, you know, have a relationship, or has brought me into different types of trauma or bad situations I didn't want to be in. For me, that's been the most successful, because hopefully if those people in your life, your friends or your family, if they do love you, hopefully they'll listen to that.
Yeah. It's a tough one, because I think that is the way to go. It's really insightful. I think it's a really good way, because you can't argue with someone's experience and how they have been affected, how they interpreted and experienced that, and went through the pain of it. But it's a really horrible conversation for a lot of people that that they're thrown into, backed into corners, made to have. Parents especially really struggle with that concept. And of course, if that's your kind of benchmark for, you know, being a holy, good Christian, I mean, it all kind of works towards, you know, be married, don't do anything beforehand that like is not, you know, beyond that line. Wherever they draw the line is always a bit ambiguous, right? But like, you know, like just don't do that, and then get married, and then we'll be happy as parents, and maybe give us kids, and then maybe do this, and we keep adding maybe a few. And but that's such a big deal for parents. It's a really hard conversation to have. I get people messaging me all the time, like being cut off from their family over just that conversation, or parents going, well, you just want to have sex, that's why you don't even, it's not even like, you know, you just gave up your faith because you just wanted to have sex, or, you know, or whatever, you know, like and you can't win that argument. It feels when someone's that rooted in their fundamental kind of concepts. I think the only way is to share. That's really good, very insightful. I think that's hopefully a good tip that someone can take away and use.
And also just gauge safety with different people. There's actually a really popular ex-Mormon speaker. He was excommunicated, but his name's John Dehlin. And he talks about, he runs this YouTube series called Mormon Stories. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of Mormon Stories,
so it's John Dehlin, and he was excommunicated for being LGBT affirming. But he talks about, you know, gauging safety with different people and kind of rating, you know, a person from like 1 to 5, like 1 being, you know, you could pour your whole heart out to this person, and then, you know, the other extreme, you don't feel safe at all sharing, you know, with whoever it is. So I always just encourage people to, you know, you do have to think about your safety. If you're a person who is, you know, a young gay person still living in your parents' home, if you feel that, you know, you will be kicked out of your home, you know, don't unnecessarily put yourself in a unhealthy situation. You know, maybe if you feel you do need to leave, get your safety net around you first and figure out where you're going to go and what your plan is. Because the last thing I would want, and, you know, I'm an adult on my own now. So if someone in my life didn't want me around, I would just say, you know, okay, that's fine. But, you know, especially for people who are in jobs or relationships or different things, where there may be a level of safety there that could be compromised. Don't feel the pressure to divulge things that will harm you until you do feel that safety.
That's really good. It feels like that's within kind of the structure of a lot of institutional church. There feels like most people grew up with a need to give an answer for where they're at as well, like that. And so, there's this impetus on them that you've got to be clear where you're at, and when you're questioned by someone in authority, you've got to tell them, and you've got to be open, you've got to be honest. Like there's that very much that authority thing driven into us, and I think that can get people in a lot of trouble a lot of time. And I think it puts this pressure on people as well. They're terrified of living their life, so even if someone can be living on their own, doing life and being happy and free, but they're terrified to, I don't know, tell their mom that they've got a partner that they're living with, because they don't have the right answers. They don't have the way to explain it in a way that they'll accept them, or they're going to be disconnected, kicked out of the family or whatever. And I think it's really hard for us to make that transition from, I've got to respect these authority figures. I've got to tell them. I've got to be able to argue it perfectly from the Bible and make a great argument for it. To be able to just go, I don't owe you an explanation even. Like I don't, especially if you're a number, I don't know which order number 5, where like you're just going to shit all over me, whatever I say anyway. I don't owe you anything. We're not having this conversation.
Right.
If you want to find out why it's okay to have sex before marriage, why some Christians think that, go educate yourself. Type that into Google and start reading. I don't need to tell you that. But maybe if it's it is a thing of like, okay, let's talk. I'll tell you my journey of how I came to that conclusion and whatever. And, but yeah, that's a big journey in and of itself. I think there's a whole mechanism within that kind of conservative Christianity that is, you owe me an answer. If you're going to change your mind about something, you need to be able to explain it well and convince me that I'm wrong, or you are wrong and you're out, which is terrifying, really terrifying. I mean, that's why so many gay, LGBTQ, whatever, end up kind of kicked out of their homes or churches. And it's terrifying.
Right. Yeah, it's awful. And just, of course, everyone would hope that the people in their life that they care about would respond positively, but we obviously know that's not always the case. And just, especially for young people out there, like whoever may be listening to this, don't, like I said, just don't put yourself in an unsafe situation, just in the name of being honest, because you have to, protect yourself as well.
Yeah, that's really good. I appreciate it. Cool. Blair, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. So people want to connect with you after hearing this, if they haven't already heard of your meteoric rise on Instagram. They should be following you on Instagram, right? Talk Purity to Me.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere else that you're on right now? You've not started a secret YouTube that's going to go live in the next week or anything like that?
I don't know, but I just have the Instagram and TikTok. If you are on that platform,
same handle?
Same handle.
Yeah.
Same handle. So you can find me both places, and that's where I'm at for now. But definitely would love to connect with people. It's a really cool group of people that follow, and just like really, really fun.
I love it. TikTok is amazing. I was so addicted to TikTok, and I just did this like purge where I've come off like my personal Facebook, TikTok, anything where I'm just like, I don't have to use this for work. And separating work from personal life is quite hard for me anyway, but anything I do, I'm just detoxing from social media right now, because I did find while TikTok was like the best of just consumption, the community,
you just scroll
forever. I would spend hours on there, but it reminds me that actually I think my first interaction with your account, because I haven't been following you for that long actually, so it's only been about a week and a half, 2 weeks or so. My first interaction with your account, I think, was a TikTok that I think my sister-in-law sent me.
Oh, really?
And that's really funny. And it's really random as well, because I don't think she's massively following a lot of people in this kind of world as well. So that's really funny.
That's so
That.
funny. Do you know which one it was?
Oh,
I don't have that many.
I'll try and scroll through and find it, and I'll
Okay.
text you and let you know. So because
That's
it's
so
random.
funny.
But
That
TikTok is
really
just
random.
it's the jam. If any person is under 25, which I mean, I couldn't think of a more important age bracket for you to be targeting in some ways, right? And
Yeah.
as hard as that is, I know it's maybe not the most healthy environment for that conversation. It's probably one of the best places for people to be hearing that message, because there's so many. I mean, I've seen so many kind of very fundamental kind of Christian. I looked when I was on TikTok initially. I was like, this is a great platform. I think I could do some stuff on this. I'm like, is there anything Christian on here? Is there anything? I started looking. I was like, whoa, there is some really pretty messed up Christianity on here, but doesn't seem like there's anyone on my page. So it was a few weeks late to it. Yeah.
It's really.
You're out there forging a new path.
Trying, and people are some people are liking it, and all the Christians are trying to dogpile at the moment. So
can you just disable comments? Is that an option on TikTok?
Maybe I think that you can. I think so.
It's tough because the comments are great, like it's good, but when it gets to be like that, ugh.
Yeah, I know it's tough.
Yeah.
But
oh well. Cool. So people need to follow you on Instagram, follow you on Twitter. Keep an eye out for that Patreon. Keep an eye out for the podcast.
TikTok, not Twitter. I don't have Twitter.
Oh, sorry, TikTok. Sorry, my brain.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
TikTok is long gone for me. When people are like, "Oh yeah, make sure people follow me on Twitter," and I'm like, "Who's still on there?"
Right.
But yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed chatting. Good to meet you finally.
Yes.
I'll let you know when this comes out. It'll probably be a couple weeks now, 2.5 weeks.
Sure.
So yeah, but it was really great to meet you.
You too. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Well, have a good night. Yeah, I hope it's not too late now, is it? Yeah, it's not too bad. About 9 or so.
Yeah.
We've got a bit of the evening left.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, have a good one. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.